There's a critical moment when shopping for a home that most first-time homebuyers underestimate. It's the moment between finding a property that you absolutely love and potentially losing it to someone else. Most first-time homebuyers actually miss out on places that could be perfect for them, not because they can't afford it, but because they froze when it came time to submit an offer. It's the moment when their realtor says, "Okay, let's put it on paper." And suddenly the anxiety hits. What if someone outbids me? Is this even the right place for me? What if there's something better out there for me? They completely shut down because they're overwhelmed and they need time to think. The problem is that in Ottawa, you never know how fast a home will sell. It could be months, but it could also be hours. But once it's sold, that's it, you missed out. Today, I'm walking you through the entire process from the moment you find the perfect property to getting your offer accepted so that you can be prepared no matter how quickly you have to act. By the end of this video, you'll know what happens before you submit the offer, how the offer itself gets built, what happens after it's submitted, and what to expect once it's accepted. You're going to understand exactly how things work, and more importantly, you can feel confident viewing properties knowing that when you find the right one, you'll be ready to submit an offer. Part 1. Before you submit the offer. Before signing any paperwork, there is a ton of behind the scenes work that needs to happen, and this is where the type of agent you hire really starts to show. Let me explain. When I'm representing a buyer, the very first thing I'm doing is gathering as much information as I possibly can about that home. That means I'm finding out the age of all the major systems in the home, whether there have been any renovations or updates, but more importantly, who actually completed that work. Was it the seller or was it a professional? If it was a professional, we want to know which company did the work and whether they have any warranties that are still applicable. This usually entails asking a lot of questions and getting any invoices so that we can make sure that everything lines up. If the seller's making any disclosures about the property, we want to make sure that we have enough information to properly understand what actually happened and what was done in order to fix the situation. And if there's nothing on file and it's an older property, we want to make sure that we're specifically asking questions about common issues for that type of home. Like, for example, has there been any water intrusions in the basement, any rodents, any mold? Without actually specifically asking them, the seller might not think to mention these types of things. We'll also want to look at the history of the neighborhood and any past sales of the homes to really understand its history. Then we'll want to make note of the condition of the property itself. Is it super well kept by a homeowner that's been living there for years? Or has it been tenanted with tenants that have dogs and it's a little rough around the edges? This will play a big part in determining the value of the home. When you walk into a home and the natural light is hitting beautifully, they have so many plants in the home, and you can picture your couch fitting in the living room, you're not necessarily thinking about the 20-year-old furnace in the basement. But I am. I'm the one asking those unsexy questions so that you don't end up with a $15,000 bill 6 months in. Once we know what the home has to offer or not, we'll start to determine market value. Here's what a lot of people don't realize. Market value is not a fixed number, and it may not even be what the seller wants. Market value in simple terms is what a buyer is willing to pay for that home in today's market. There are two main factors that help us find market value. The first and most talked about is comparable sales. We'll consider each past sale based on how similar it is to the subject property, based on the actual style and size of the home, but we'll also look at location and also how recently it sold. A property with a lot of physical differences will require a lot more adjustments than a home that has the exact same floor plan, meaning it's less comparable. A home that sold yesterday is going to give us a stronger sense of market value in comparison to a home that sold 6 months ago because the market is constantly changing. I present the most comparable properties to my buyers, and we discuss the pros and cons of each one of them in comparison to the subject property. The second factor really comes down to supply and demand. Competition will drive the price up while increased inventory will bring it down. Even if there is a lot of inventory and not a ton of buyers shopping in the market, If a home is super unique, it could also encourage buyers to pay a little bit more because they know that a home like that doesn't come up often. As active buyers, you will know what's happening in your specific market and will be able to use that knowledge in order to build an offer strategy. Once we know everything there is to know about that property and also that market, we will start to build an offer strategy, and it's honestly different from one offer to the next. Over the last couple years, Ottawa has seen drastic changes in the market. We went from most homes receiving multiple offers throughout the pandemic and selling for over asking price with no conditions, which was absolutely wild, to essentially the complete opposite. Today, each neighborhood is performing differently, but the average home is going to follow a typical sales cycle, which means it's spending anywhere from a week to a month on the market before it sells conditionally, and it will sell pretty close to asking price if it is well positioned and marketed. Now, that doesn't mean that multiple offers are never happening, which means we'll have to consider your competition when building your offer. If you're competing with other buyers, you're going to have a different approach than if you were negotiating one-on-one with a super motivated seller. This is when preparation gives you confidence to build an offer. Part 2, building the offer. This is where things start to feel really real because you are signing a legally binding contract and it is a big step. As a first-time homebuyer, it is most likely one of the biggest commitments you've ever made to date in your lifetime. So let's talk about it. Knowing what to expect means less surprises when the time comes and also less stress overall. I have an actual agreement of purchase and sale right in front of me, and I'm going to put it up on the screen here so that you can follow along. Please keep in mind that this is the agreement for a freehold property, and it will vary slightly for a condo, so just keep that in mind. These documents are also subject to change, so if you're watching this video anytime in the future, please note that there could be some differences. I'm here on a whole new day because I was trying to edit this video and I was falling asleep listening to myself explain every little detail of this agreement. So we are switching it up. I realize that it's way more important for you to watch until the end of this video and get the big key takeaways than take the chance that you're gonna get bored and click away. I promise you when the time comes, we can break it all down together. Because if you understand this part, you are already ahead of most buyers. It's still important for you to take a look at the agreement of purchase and sale while I'm going through each key point because I want it to feel familiar to you. We'll be one step closer to having it feel less scary when we actually submit the offer. Let's start with price because that's what everyone looks at first. I want you to understand that we're not just throwing a number out there and crossing our fingers. We're actually building a case as to why the seller should accept your offer. Yes, the price is a huge factor, but there are other little things that we can tweak in order to make it more attractive to the sellers. When determining the price, we are looking at the condition of the home, how it compares to other similar properties, what those other properties have sold for, what the competition is like, and also your comfort level and budget. I can tell you right now that a home that has been lived in by a single elderly woman for the last 20 years is going to look a lot different than one that is occupied by a family with 3 kids, 2 dogs, a cat, and a bunny. So yes, these small details matter. Then we look at the market. Has the home been sitting on the market for a while and are we negotiating with a motivated seller? Or is it a super hot property with multiple offers? This is going to affect our strategy. The goal isn't just to buy a house, it's actually to get it for you at terms that you are comfortable with, and this is where all of our preparation really comes in handy. Next up is the deposit, which is submitted once the offer itself is actually accepted, so everyone has agreed on all of the terms. It's usually about 1 to 2% of the purchase price, and it is a small part of your overall down payment. It is submitted to the listing brokerage and it is held in trust until your closing date, or if ever something were to not work out and you had to back away from the transaction, it is returned to you in full with no deductions. Then we have the irrevocability, which is when the offer itself expires. So this gives the seller a timeline in which they actually have to either accept your offer, decline it completely, or they can actually counter your offer, so change certain parts of the offer and send it back to you. If they are countering the offer, they can actually do so anytime before or after this irrevocability date. So just because the offer expires doesn't mean they're necessarily done negotiating. It could have just meant that they needed a little bit of extra time. In a slower, balanced market, usually we give sellers anywhere between, 20 to 24 hours to review the offer. But in a more aggressive market, sometimes it could be as short as 4 to 6 hours. Then we have the closing date, and this is the date in which you actually take ownership of the property and all the funds are transferred. Quick tip from experience, I recommend that you set your closing date anytime between a Tuesday and a Thursday. This allows you to avoid holidays and also make sure that you have a little bit of buffer time. If for some reason there are delays and your closing is on a Friday, well then you're stuck dealing with things on the weekend when the banks and lawyers are closed, or moving it to Monday, which could cause some serious delays. You also shouldn't schedule your move for this day just because you usually don't get your keys until later in the afternoon. And if there are any delays, you don't want your moving truck waiting outside. And you'll probably want to do some cleaning, maybe some small repairs like painting, so it doesn't hurt to have a few days buffer time. On the next page, we start to get into what is included or excluded with the property, and also what rental items will actually carry over to the new owners. Things that could be included with the price could be appliances, could be curtains, it could be pool accessories, so it's important to have everything listed clearly. Common exclusions are sentimental light fixtures or mirrors or even a freezer in the basement. The last thing we want is a misunderstanding, so if we're not sure, we're going to make sure it's listed on this page. Then we have rental items, most commonly being the hot water tank. These contracts actually get transferred over to the new owner, so you'll want to know how much the monthly cost is and also what the buyout amount is if you want to stop paying the rental fee. Now, once we get past this point, things start to get a lot more details and the print starts to feel a little bit smaller, but you don't have to be overwhelmed. Instead of going line by line, I'm going to highlight the really important features, and then once it really comes time to submit an offer, we can go into everything in detail. The next one is a big one, and it's something that a lot of people miss. If you want a home inspection included in your offer, you actually have to make sure that it is included in your Schedule A, which I'm getting to very soon, so please stick around. If it is not listed there, Section 13 says that you have had the chance to look at the property and you are accepting its condition. Another important one is property tax adjustments. A lot of sellers choose to actually pay their entire property tax bill for the year at once. And what that means is that it's prepaid. So if you're taking over the property mid-year, you have to make sure that you are budgeting to pay them back for that total. And this could be a few $1,000s, especially because the average property taxes in Ottawa for a home ranging between $500,000 to $600,000 is probably going to be around $4,000. Then we have the section that talks about UFI. This is a type of insulation that was used to build homes between the 1970s and the 1980s, and it was banned in Canada due to the fact that it can cause health issues. If you are buying a home that was built during that time, the seller is warranting that they have no knowledge of there being UFI present on the property. It is up to you to verify the age of the home that you're buying and make sure that you are aware of potential building products that were used during that time and how they could affect your lifestyle and plan for the property. This is one of those things that doesn't come up often, but it's good to be aware of. Then we have Schedule A, and this is where things can really start to get customized. It's where your conditions live and also where additional clauses are added to the agreement. So things like your financing, your home inspection, your insurance conditions will all be listed here. It could even mean things like repairs or cleaning requests. This is where deals are often lost. I'm going to be very real with you. A lot of buyers miss out on properties because they include too many conditions in their Schedule A. The more you have, the more uncertain your deal feels to the seller because there are a lot more hurdles to get over before you get to a firm sale. Now, that definitely does not mean to remove all of your protections. It just means that we need to be prepared ahead of time. Things like getting a firm pre-approval or maybe a pre-offer home inspection can allow us to play around with things in order to make the offer more attractive to the seller. What you probably don't know is that real estate agents don't actually have any legal authority. What that means is that if something isn't specifically listed in the agreement word for word, then there's not really much that your lawyer can do in order to make sure the seller does it before closing. For example, having the property professionally cleaned on closing. Although leaving a home in clean condition seems like common sense, if it's not specifically there and you get into a worst case scenario where there is garbage all over the property, well, it wasn't specifically listed in the agreement, so there's not really much your lawyer can do in order to help you. Working with an agent that is preparing for all those worst case scenarios means that you will have all the protections that you need in your Schedule A without you even having to think about them. There is a lot in this document and there will be more to review when the time comes, but at least you have a big picture idea of what is included in the agreement of purchase and sale. There are really no standards when it comes to submitting an offer. It is what is actually right for you. Okay, that was a lot of information, but we got through it. We built your offer, and now you'll get a copy through an electronic signature program so that you can look through it as well and sign where needed. And once it's completely signed and ready to go, it gets submitted to the listing agent. Now, as your agent, I would not just send the offer in a blank email and call it a day and just hope for the best. We want to make sure that the listing agent and the seller can trust us and know that we will close on this property. So I would make sure that I am in touch with the listing agent every step of the way, from asking questions before we even submit the offer to know what the seller is looking for and what things we can do outside of the price that would make them more inclined to accept our offer. And then also give them a call throughout the negotiations, making sure that if there are things that we can do to improve, we are aware of them. Although we do have to wait, I am definitely not sitting back. So your offer has been submitted. Now what? Part 3 is what happens after you submit the offer. One of 3 things is going to happen. Either the seller is going to accept your offer as is, which would be incredible, but they could also decline the offer altogether, or they will decide to counter the offer, so change certain terms of the agreement in order to make it more favorable for them. This is where the negotiation happens, and honestly, this is another part where you're really going to see the type of agent that you've hired. My job during the negotiations as a real estate agent is to make sure that you're protected, you're competitive, you're not overexposed, while also making sure that you have the best chance possible to secure that property. Negotiations can go back and forth a couple of times. Sometimes this is in writing, sometimes it's just over the phone, depending on the types of people that we're dealing with. So if it does take a little while, just know that I am 100% on your side and I will communicate with you every step of the way to make sure that you feel informed and that I am doing everything I can to make sure that you get the best terms. Once both the seller and the buyer agree to the same terms, the offer is accepted, and that marks the end of the offer stage. Ooh, this is when we celebrate, but not too much. If you have conditions, you have now entered the conditional period. You'll submit your deposit within 24 hours, and then you have that conditional period to check the home and make sure that everything looks good. Now, this honestly deserves an entire video in itself because there is a lot to cover, but I just wanted you to know what's coming next. You'll get your financing finalized, you'll do all of your inspections, and just make sure that this property is the right fit for you. I know this was a lot of information and it may not feel like it, but the offer process is actually very simple. The right agent can remove all the guesswork, eliminate the panic, and make sure you get the home that you want without necessarily having to overpay. I actually want you to understand what you're signing and why it matters so that 6 months down the line when you are living in your first home, all the feelings that you have about your experience are amazing. If you're thinking of purchasing a property in Ottawa and you want to work with an agent that is going to break down all those little details for you and that also cares about you and your family, then please fill out the form in the description of this video or in my bio because I would be so happy to work with you.